So before I just go on with the agenda, to introduce myself to those people that don't know me, I'm Neelam Patel, Chief Exec of MedCity. And why did we embark on this study when we already knew that there was a high demand for space, you might ask? Well, I guess what we didn't know was how much demand or what type of demand. And for MedCity to be able to facilitate growth, it's important that we have visibility and granularity of that demand so we can help to supply or to help to shape the supply to meet industry needs and also the needs of our communities and ecosystem. So today you'll hear highlights from the report and hear key stakeholders from industry and the healthcare system who'll bring these highlights to life. We'll also share our recommendations and how together we can grow the life science sector to an even greater global position. But first, I'd like to take this opportunity to remember our colleague, Phil Jackson, who passed away very suddenly earlier this year. Phil laid the foundations for this study and is a passionate advocate for supporting businesses to grow through provision of the right infrastructure. I hope this report passes his high standards and it achieves the impact that he would have wished. And finally, we couldn't have developed this report without the partnership from Jonathan and his team at Creative Places, the MedCity team involved in its production, and the support from British Land, Derwent, IQHQ, Mitsui Fujisan, the Reef Group, Stanhope, Scale Space, and of course the GLA and LEAP. So with that, firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Rajesh Agrawal, Deputy Mayor of Business at the GLA, to say a few words. Rajesh.
Thank you very much, Neelam, for that kind introduction. And I recall this is just over 2 years ago, on the 5th of November 2019, giving a speech on the top floor of London City Hall about the strength of London's life sciences sector, which MedCity has been instrumental in fortifying. And some of you were there. The fireworks were going off as they should be, as life sciences is a sector that we should all celebrate, and now more than ever. And whilst we don't sadly have any fireworks today, I do feel that this report absolutely deserves them. The Mayor and I see life sciences as a priority economic sector for London, the greatest city on earth. So it's great to see that this report highlights the strengths and potential of London to further grow its thriving life sciences ecosystem. But before I get into the report's detail, I would like to take a moment to pay tribute to Phil Jackson, who is sadly no longer with us. I know Phil worked hard for so many years to support London's life sciences ecosystem. Phil kicked off this study at the start of this year, and the report being launched today is a fine tribute to his efforts. So thank you, Phil. The report makes it clear that the fundamentals of London's life sciences R&D activity are absolutely exceptional. There's a huge demand for life sciences R&D space in London. In fact, during the course of the pandemic, the demand has further increased. This is testament to the huge influx of investment into London life sciences, with London top of the list of places for companies to move to. Companies also find London as an excellent place to recruit staff. Of course, talent is one of our greatest strengths. In some key areas, applicant numbers and the applicant quality is the best in the world. And my focus as Deputy Mayor of London for Business is to helping to protect and create jobs, to ensure we recover from Brexit and COVID-19 as a stronger, fairer and greener economy, delivering good jobs. Critical to this is ensuring that we support our entrepreneurs and that they have the right workspaces in the right places. My team and I look forward to continuing to work with MedCity and other partners to help ensure that London remains a place where new ideas are generated and turned into products and services for UK-wide and in fact the worldwide benefit. And we keep on doing excellent work. And so the recent initiatives from our office includes, we've been supporting R&D collaboration. We are funding MedCity to deliver the Collaborate to Innovate London Diagnostic Program. It provides grant funding and wider support to enable medical diagnostic SMEs to collaborate with universities, large companies, and medical research partners to progress their innovation. And then we are doing we are supporting entrepreneurs through the Mayor's Entrepreneur Program, which supports student entrepreneurship through grant funding and access to support, including mentorship and training, to help young people turn their ideas into thriving businesses, including in health. The program has a particular focus on supporting young people from less privileged backgrounds. And of course, our award-winning London Business Hub has been supporting small businesses throughout the pandemic. It is absolutely amazing what we can do when we work together for the greater good and the difference that innovations in life sciences can make. And to do great things together, it helps to have the state-of-art spaces to do it in, which is what this report is all about. So I encourage you all to read the report and then make firm plans to build your life science capabilities here, as London is at the epicenter of UK's life sciences growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, for your opening remarks there. And now I'd like to introduce Jonathan Burroughs, Chief Exec of Creative Places. It's been fantastic to partner with Jonathan, not only for this study, but also for the previous study in 2016. So Jonathan is going to set the context for this study and also take you through some of the highlights and conclusions. Over to you, Jonathan.
Neelam. I thought it was quite important that I present you with some slides today so that you can see some of the facts and figures that we found through this study. First off, I must say the interest that exists in the life sciences sector in London is quite extraordinary today. We were quite concerned, frankly, going into 2021, trying to ask companies about what they might need into the future with COVID and so much change likely to happen in the need for workspace into the future. But ultimately what we found is that the demand is certainly there, it's growing, and I'm pleased to say that we've been able to come out with some quite interesting and factual results. So Katerina, if you'd be kind enough to help me come through the slide deck. We were able to survey 80 companies. That's the same number as we had participate in our study 5 years ago in 2016. This time round, we found that we had over 50 companies with requirements, and the total adds up to just over 500,000 square feet. Now, it'd be fair to say that's not the total demand for London in the life sciences. That's just from this cohort. There are obviously hundreds of businesses in London that undertake life sciences work. 270,000 square feet of the identified need is within the next 2 years, and that's up from 67,000 square feet needed within 2 years when we surveyed it in 2016. So we're in a growing marketplace. When asked specifically about COVID, businesses told us that it actually, if anything, affects their business positively rather than negatively. And in terms of the way the UK is seen today, it is recognised for its extraordinary research base. It is seen as a very accessible research base, and we've got extraordinary quality in our dynamic SMEs. Next slide, please. The amount of money pouring into life sciences SMEs in the UK is quite extraordinary today. You can see here in this detail from Crunchbase the way in which businesses seeking Series A to C fundraising have enjoyed money coming in 2021. That last chart for 2021 only being through to mid-September. And you can see that London in the dark blue there has increased its share of that activity significantly since 2018. That will mean that there are businesses well funded and ultimately seeking more floor space as they employ more people. Next slide, please. Businesses today find it difficult to categorize themselves generally into one particular subsector or another. And so the way we approach this study is to ask businesses to advise which subsectors they are active in or aspire to be active in. And against the answers given to that, we've then endeavored to look at the nature of floor space that they feel they need. So you'll see, for example, with digital health, we've now got some of those businesses looking for wet laboratory space, but they need principally office space. And you can see that the pharma biotechs, for example, are looking mostly for wet lab space. Next slide, please. This table here is designed to help you see the nature of accommodation that's required in terms of the complexity of the laboratory and other space that is required. So to the far left-hand end is manufacturing facilities, typically GMP manufacturing facilities that require clean rooms and a particularly controlled environment. Wet lab space with extract to air comes next. And then as you move towards the right, the property industry will find it easier to deliver this slightly lower specification space. And what we're seeing this time around is that there are a lot of businesses that need wet laboratories with extract to air provision. And we've got businesses that are now telling us they need manufacturing facilities. Next slide, please. It's interesting to engage with businesses this time round. Many of them are looking for flexibility, and this flexibility is across all sizes of companies. Particularly the smaller companies are now looking for wet laboratory space that they can have available on easy in, easy out terms. And so that's one of the key messages that we bring out of this report, that somehow we need to ensure that there is flexible space, even more so than is delivered at the moment through the innovation centres that exist in London. Okay, I think that, is there one more slide? Okay, so that's my last slide. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Neelam in a second on the recommendations that we reached through this report. But before I do so, if I can just conclude by saying that London is clearly a powerhouse for the life sciences research and R&D activity when seen globally. We believe that its success in life sciences R&D will have a direct impact on the rest of the UK, that it does work to the government's levelling up agenda to build the sectoral activity in London. And what we're finding is that at the moment, demand for property is exceeding the supply. So we do need to advance the delivery of property in the right places. The study is guiding us towards relatively accessible, rich in amenity locations. And we very much need to work to ensure that within those sorts of locations, there is ability for the sector to come and use spaces creatively, and that SMEs might be able to afford to locate in those places where for sure they will be able to grow faster and they will be able to maintain their links to the research base from perhaps where they've come, or clinical activity and others that are relevant to them. So if I can just hand over to Neelam, please, to just give you a few minutes on what the recommendations are.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and I'm sure everybody's wanting to dig a bit deeper into that data, and you will see the full report, and if you have questions, then you're very welcome to shoot those to Jonathan or ourselves afterwards. So as Jonathan mentioned, after reviewing the data, we felt that there were 5 clear recommendations that we would put to the report. The first to really try and address the need for more space, and in particular the greater complex laboratory spaces in areas of high demand, with the necessary access to operational facilities that are needed for early stage SMEs. So that is the first recommendation, and the second relates to the need to develop higher GMP small scale manufacturing facilities. And the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult are very well placed to provide expertise to help stakeholders do that. The last three recommendations are perhaps a bit softer and relate to three things. Firstly, what we've done here in producing the demand study really gives visibility to demand and activity and needs to then allow for supply and the system to respond effectively. And we feel it's really important to continue to provide that type of real-time resource. The second of the softer recommendations is to create networking hubs in key locations to allow collaboration between sectors and districts. And the last recommendation is really to build on one of the reasons why London is attractive in the first place, and that is to encourage.
MedCity are just launching their demand study in life sciences.
Can we all mute, please? Sorry, there was a bit of an interruption there. Just finishing off there then, and it's really to encourage the growth of a strong supply chain of skills for the future by fostering partnerships between higher education institutes and industry. So what are the next steps? So we strongly feel at MedCity that we can engage with stakeholders in the system to discuss these recommendations and agree the appropriate action plans over the coming months. And we look forward to working with many of you today in doing so. So that was some headlines on the report itself, and I'm really delighted now to invite some representatives of our ecosystem to speak to us about their perspectives. Starting with Ginny Acha, Global Lead and of Global Regulatory Policy at MSD. Ginny, would you like to spend a few minutes just describing MSD's perspectives and your views around London and its attraction for R&D?
Yeah, thank you, Neelam, and thank you also to Jonathan and Rajesh for starting us so well on this conversation. I think one of the key points I wanted to come back to actually is just a curiosity of why is there a global lead for regulatory policy for a US headquartered company in London, and it's precisely for that reason. I'm here as part of the Merck Research Labs MSD research site in London, and it's all about, for us as a company, this is all about place. And it's, not just a question of physical space, which of course is always a necessary feature to basing a large company that's investing in not just office space, but clinical space and research labs. But we also look at London as a place where it's about the talent that is here on site and attracted. So for us, our scientists are the most critical factor of how we do our work. And London is an opportunity not just to draw from an extremely world-leading talent pool of researchers in the life sciences, but also as a place to attract our leading scientists who will come and join our teams here and be part of it. And I think it's a question of not just the talent of today, but as Neelam's describing, the pipeline of talent that we can work with. And that brings me to the second part of place, which is community. And the community that we have in London and the support that we have in our own research really is reflected in the collaborations we've established here. So we have collaborations with academic centers, we have collaborations with research sites and facilities. I think, currently have one of our sites based in the Crick, Francis Crick Institute. That's a good exemplar of how we work as an embedded site. But we also have partnerships with biotech and other groups that are here in London. And, quite interesting for today's discussion, I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine who's a young entrepreneur in the life sciences, actually in Switzerland at the present. And he was asking me because they're intending to move to London. And that was one of their key interests, was the place. It's not just a place of a case of finding the right site to establish their growing company, but they want to be in the middle of it, was the way he put it to me. They want to be in the middle of the conversations, and this is what we mean by place. So I think that's something for us, and why we've made our investment as MSD to pitch our tent here and be part of that London place. The impact to date is key for us. So we have been, as I mentioned, establishing the collaborations we have. We look to hopefully future engagement with our Future Health, besides the CRIC, our work with King's College London, of course, Genomics England, and the European Institute of Aging. We have also our outreach to Europe. So again, London isn't just London because it's uniquely and individually so. It's because London is also a gateway to partnerships and collaborations in science internationally. And that's something that we hope will continue to be a critical step in the future. We're committed to the life sciences vision that the government has announced, but we think as part of that, that really has to think holistically about these communities. And obviously my perspective is largely focused in that research side, but for MSD as a whole, it's about the entirety. It's understanding bench to bedside and what being in London and what the London offer provides. And that's obviously as being part of the overall UK life sciences vision. So as we look to this agenda, this optimism for ecosystems that I'm describing, we need to keep UK at the forefront of scientific progression internationally. We need to keep London as a means to generate that catalysis. So how can London help that leveling up process for the whole of the UK and even internationally? How do we use London to galvanize the momentum that we've seen so beautifully represented in the COVID-19 pandemic, and how do we use that looking forward? And I hope that, as we are committed to the life sciences, we continue to build the community in partnership with MedCity, in partnership with the Mayor's Office, in partnership with you all here on the call today. And I'm just really glad to be here as part of this launch, which I think is going to be marking a really important milestone for those next years of how London can go from strength to strength to build up that opportunity for us all in life sciences. So thank you, Neelam, for the chance to contribute today.
Thank you so much, Ginny. And what we heard about was the importance of talent, the bench to bedside interest, the importance of communities and being part of a larger ecosystem. So with that, I'd really like to hear or to introduce to you Krzysztof Potempa, founder and CEO of BRAINCURES, a smaller company than MSD, I would say, but hopefully with the same potential. Krzysztof, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation to share my biotech building journey in London, Neelam. And it's a really fantastic report that really follows on to your also AI report, which we should not forget that you published in June. So I think there's two things that people should be reading from MedCity. So my journey really started in 2016 at the One Nucleus Genesis conference, where I picked up a leaflet from MedCity, which advertised the London Bioscience Innovation Center. And after over 10 years post PhD in the genomics of neuroscience data, I decided that I had an idea of how to cure brain diseases from my PhD research, but I wasn't able to translate in the academic settings and the pharma settings I worked in. So I realized I need to go on my own. And I realized that the London Bioscience Innovation Center, through its virtual biotech package, had offered, you could say, the solution to building a company or starting to build a company. So in March 2017, I registered the company. I think London and the UK is really fantastic in terms of how easy it is to set up a business and how the government makes it easy to do that. And then, like I think many startups, I went through 2 different accelerators, the Innovation Forum Accelerator and the Panacea Stars Accelerator, through which I met my business development partner, Peter Ball, and I think one of the key conferences also was BioTrinity. So in May 2017, just 2 months after setting up at the LBIC, I made a presentation of BRAINCURES, which actually at that point had a Mickey Mouse ratatouille in it. And I met my first team member, Jean-Francois Williamson, who started to help in the journey of, you could say, from a scientist to entrepreneur, because I think this is a key thing that we need to realize, is that we need to keep growing, and we need to have people who help people realize their dreams. So once we had the team together in 2018, we started to make some headway in having some biotech companies and pharma companies, you could say, do pilot studies with us that are ongoing. And I think we're at the stage of, we've also received some coverage from the Longevity Tech magazine, that has described our technology in an article called Move Over Artificial Intelligence, Here Comes Biological Intelligence. And it just shows how biology will be key, and how startups with novel ideas will be key to, you could say, solving a lot of the challenges we have today. So I think on the points that are relevant to the report, it's clear to me that hot desking for such virtual startups as my own, or these data startups, that there's one setting up each week, I think, at least. We need a space, some kind of cafe where we can meet and do business at, in probably each major London city. That would be a great thing. So we don't have to scramble. You could say, let's meet at this convenient Starbucks. And I think also a great thing that would be to have in the future are, you could say, is open innovation projects that pharma sometimes spearhead, or more and more pharma are starting to spearhead, where you have open hours and sometimes even pilot projects up to, say, 200K that let companies, you could say, at least will do a pilot of the technology that they have. I think that would be really future to both the buildings themselves are great, but actually giving access to small virtual companies would be, I think, one of the desires that hopefully your report sparks. And also more, you could say, accelerators that really accelerate companies, not just introduce people, but help with, you could say, some of the funding, you could say, struggles of early biotechs. So yes, I think thank you so much for allowing me to share BRAINCURE's story, and I'm sure, and I hope to in the future. Well, I think to summarize, I think it's really all too often we have these conversations around infrastructure and connecting the science community. They focus on big companies and large academic institutes. We really need to make sure startups and small, medium enterprise are considered too, because it's the success of these businesses that feed the pipeline of bigger life sciences companies. The whole ecosystem then will thrive together, because at the moment, the infrastructure and availability of lab space is limiting our growth. And this MedCity report really highlights how we can start to change that. So thank you for the time, Neelam, and great job, Jonathan and team.
Thank you very much, Krzysztof, for your summary. What I heard, I think you say, Krzysztof, is resonating in the report as well. And certainly I think your journey has needed the support from organisations like incubators and organisations that are able to support in terms of business as well as funding. But what I also heard you say is the importance of meeting people and networking with peers and experts, and having the ability to hot desk and come and go, and all of these are reflected also by your peers in other SMEs and as stated in the report. So thank you for that, Krzysztof. Next on the agenda, and we're running actually ahead of time, which is quite unusual actually for a virtual event, or maybe it's not unusual. We have, I'm really pleased to invite Dr. Vin Diwakar to speak to us about the importance of the NHS and London to innovation. However, Vin has been called into an urgent meeting, as is often the case in terms of the NHS. So I'm not exactly sure if he's in this session just yet or not yet joined. I don't believe he has joined, in which case we're going to have to deviate a little bit, probably. And Ian, I might have to put you on the spot, who is our last person on the agenda today. And Ian, I know you are going to do closing remarks, and I know it's premature to be closing remarks because we haven't yet heard of Vin, but while we wait for Vin, I wondered if you wanted to say a few words on your perspectives, and hopefully Vin will be able to join, and if not, we may then end a bit early.
Thank you, Neelam. I'm happy to try and fill the gap till Vin is able to join. I think the first thing I should do is introduce myself. So I'm Ian Campbell. So I'm the chair of MedCity, been the chair of MedCity for just over a year now, and a year where we've been conducting almost all our business exactly the way we're doing today. And although not ideal, I think it highlights that even in remote working, we are able to identify what the future needs of business are going to be and how we can construct an event that talks about life sciences with contributions from large companies such as MSD, startups such as BRAINCURES, and hopefully Vin will join us to give us the NHS perspective. But I think bringing all those together demonstrates that London has everything it needs to be the mature cluster for life sciences where growth is going to be the key. And I think the interesting thing that I've seen from the report is the blend of space and the sophistication of the requirements, and actually the change over the last 4 years from primarily wet lab space to wet, dry and office space and into manufacturing. And as we've seen, the emergence of advanced therapies for London has been a huge boost in terms of the companies that are being created and launched. I heard today that UCL alone in the last year or so has had 5 IPOs, most of them in the cell and gene therapy space. So definitely London is doing something right. And if I would say something to Jenny, I say that the talent that is coming through is exemplified not just by the students and the postdocs that we're creating, but the businesses that are following on the back of that. And I think it really makes a key statement here that the combination of the academic infrastructure, the access to finance, the access to universities and the pool of talent means that London now is in a stronger place than it was pre-pandemic from a life sciences perspective. I don't think any of us would have thought that if we look back over the start of the pandemic 18 months ago. I think certainly from a MedCity perspective, what does this do for us? It makes us realize that there's a lot of convening to do to get the recommendations from the report into realizable actions, to engage with the infrastructure providers, but also to engage with the companies and the communities to make sure that when that space is available, that actually we're able to grow and scale the businesses so that startups become scale-ups, become IPOs, and then we get that infrastructure that gives us an effect where we can see the growth continuing for many years to come. And certainly from my perspective with my other hat on, which is the NED role of the cell and gene therapy catapult, being based in London and then having to go out to Stevenage to build the manufacturing centre has told us that there's a broader ecosystem we have to engage with within not just the Golden Triangle, but within the UK as a whole. And we should always remember that we are part of a growing community across the UK, reaching into resources and skills across not just England, but Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, to try and make sure that we do magnify the impact for health and life sciences. And clearly, MedCity's role is very much focused on London. And I think the mayor's, the Deputy Mayor Rajesh's introductory comments were very heartening to see that the mayor sees this as a growth area for London. And I think for many of us, we welcome the opportunity to participate in the life sciences vision that was launched a few weeks ago. And some of us that have been in the ecosystem for a few years want to see that flourish into knowledge translating into new biological findings. And ultimately, why are we involved in this? Because we want to make a difference to patients at the end of the day. So from MedCity, I can say that we will wholeheartedly move forward, trying to build on today's report, to work with the sponsors who have helped us develop this report. So in particular, British Land, Derwent London, IQHQ, Mitsui Fudosan, Stanhope, Reef Group, and Scale Space have all been instrumental. As many of you may know, MedCity is also sponsored by the GLA, and we're very grateful for their help and support as we continue to serve the community. And then I think overall, what we want to do is ensure that as the report is launched, as we get feedback, we then build on that. We've had the AI report, we've had the report on infrastructure. Now we need to look at investment and how we can maximize across not just wet science and advanced therapies, but also digital health, and how we can convene informatics around data understanding and create economic benefit as well as patient benefit. I think with that, Neelam, if I talk for much longer, I'm going to put the audience to sleep. So what I want to do is also thank you, and in particular, thank Creative Places and Jonathan for putting together the report.
Ian, you've gone on mute in your enthusiasm to stop speaking.
Maybe that was somebody trying to tell me something. I'm just wondering if Vin has joined us or not.
I think he has, actually.
Vin is here, and apologies for being a few minutes late.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Vin. In fact, we were running a bit early, and so we swapped the agenda about. So Ian has swapped with you, but we're delighted that you're able to join us. So thank you for giving us your perspectives on NHS and the role it plays in terms of innovation and life sciences. Over to you.
Thanks, Neelam, and with very apologies for running a bit late, everyone. So I'm Vin, I'm the Regional Medical Director for London. And first, I'd just like to thank you for inviting me, because it's not been invited to one of these events before. So, I mean, there's a simple answer, isn't there, which is, yes, of course it is. But it's probably worth saying a little bit about why, and in particular, rising to the challenge about the NHS being better able to describe what it needs from the life sciences industry and how life sciences can help us, which historically has been a challenge throughout its history. In fact, it's interesting that going right back to the inception of the NHS, William Beveridge said that the NHS had to be based on research and analysis. And in fact, when he was writing the Beveridge report, which was the lead up to the foundation of the NHS, a lot of the work done on the benefit was written by a young and talented economist called Harold Wilson. So it goes right back to the inception of the NHS. So the second thing to say is that my boss, Sir David Sloman, prior to the pandemic, was very passionate about setting out his vision for the NHS in London for us to be the healthiest global city. And you might then ask yourself, well, what does that actually mean then? But actually what it means is if you look at the rankings that are used to show whether we're the healthiest global city, we were about 7th or 8th. And so actually we had a reasonable prospect if you look at those measures of getting there. And there are good reasons why I think it's realistic for getting there, which I'll describe in a minute. So if you're kind of trying to describe, well, what are the big ticket items that the NHS is worried about? When you go back and look at a study that was published, an international study called the Global Burden of Disease Study, you can see that between the study that was done in 2009 and the study that was published in 2019, there's some very significant shifts. Firstly, in what causes the most deaths in the UK, and secondly, what causes the most years lost due to disability or ill health. So the first thing to say is actually, if you look at us in London, deaths from heart disease and from stroke have dropped a bit. And given that we've worked hard at globally good services for heart disease and stroke, maybe that's not very surprising. But deaths from lower respiratory tract infection and from lung disease, as well as deaths from Alzheimer's and dementia and deaths from certain types of cancer have all gone up. And again, if you look at the level of pollution that we've got in London and all the other various factors associated with lung disease, maybe that's not very surprising either. And when you look at the death and disability combined, you see a very obvious increase in the number of people with whose quality of life is affected by things like diabetes and being overweight, a very significant increase in the number of people who are suffering from depression and other mental health disorders, a significant number of people suffering with musculoskeletal problems, and also problems such as headache. Again, all not very surprising, but it's great to see those actually documented as being some of the big ticket clinical type problems that we're going to have to be able to deal with in order, if we are to be the world's healthiest global city, and in particular deal with the issues that are amenable to NHS care. I think we all recognise that 80% of your health is actually dependent on what are called the wider determinants of health, the street, the neighbourhood, the house that you live in, your employment. But actually the things that are amenable to healthcare are the things I've mentioned. And then the top 3 or 4 risk factors, again, still are tobacco. So smoking is still a significant factor, even though it's dropping in London. Obesity, high body mass index, high blood pressure, and alcohol use. So if we want to look at prevention, that's where it is. And then very briefly, if you say, well, what has been the challenges of the pandemic? Well, actually, they are a significant rise in mental health problems, a loss of jobs, a lack of employment opportunities, a rise in domestic violence, and a rise in health inequalities as being big ticket issues that are challenges at a social level that are going to cause an impact down the line. And I think there's data that suggests for every 1% rise, for every 5% rise in unemployment, you get a 1% rise in underlying mental health disorders. Now, if I just give you a couple of examples of how inequalities have increased, the NHS is delivering the biggest vaccine programme in its history. And currently, if you look across the gradient, there's a very significant association, firstly with deprivation in quintile, and secondly with race and ethnicity. So people in the most deprived parts of our society, you can see a gradient between people that identify as white British, where 85% have accepted 1 dose of the vaccine, and those who identify as Black Caribbean or Black African or Black other, to use the census guidelines, where only 49% have taken up the vaccine. So those are all the kind of big challenges, if you like, for our time. And those align quite nicely, actually, with the government's vision for this country. Because actually, if you look at what the pandemic has given us, it has given us innovation and rapid translation into practice in the life sciences like we've never seen before. And all of you will know the benefits that have been created from new therapies, from the vaccine program, to new ways to handle a pandemic through modeling and so on. And our opportunity now, I think, is to take the mindset that was given there with that approach and apply it to those big healthcare challenges that I've just mentioned, like cancer, dementia, mental health, obesity, aging, respiratory disease, and vaccines going forward. On top of that, to address these issues, we have now got a mass of ways of collecting data that enable us to solve those problems. So not only have we got the things that me as a doctor are used to collecting, like family history, laboratory data, clinical notes, but we now have that very unstructured data, the ability to analyze it through natural language processing. We've got new genomic data, we've got drug data, we've got diagnostic data, we've got pedigree analysis, we've got metabolomics, we've got epigenomics, we've got lots of things and a basic understanding now in basic sciences and applied sciences that we've never seen before, plus all those different things that you all know about the way in which we can apply scientific techniques in order to better understand the nature of disease and finding solutions to those. And I was very pleased to see in that report the particular benefits and things that London can bring together through the co-location of some of our greatest universities and greatest thinkers, with a population of 9 million people that is bigger than at least 10 European countries in a very small geographical space, that would enable us to drive up even further than we've already got the quality of research and innovation that we've already seen. And I think it's great in the report to see the benefits and the track record that London has in this area. Just my final words would be about a couple of things that I think may be of interest to you. So the first thing is that we are currently involved in developing a joined up, depersonalized information and data set as part of a population data set. And if we can do it in London, it will be the largest structured population data set in the world. Other places are competing with us. So if we don't move quickly, places like Scandinavia and North America will move quicker. We know that Israel's already got a very good data set at all, but we need to move fast with what we're creating in London. And we've got a great partnership now with universities and with the NHS to do that. Doing that, we will create a health data research platform, a trusted research environment, which then allows depersonalized data about all sorts of things that are recorded in the health record to then be deployed for the benefits of research and to connect it with life sciences and the rest of the research community to give us actionable insights that we can rapidly use to translate into practice. So the final thing I'll just say is that I think a personal vision in a workshop that we recently held with a range of researchers in the city was, I think we've got a real opportunity, if we play this right, for London to become a research and innovation city. And through that, the benefits for me is improved outcomes for our citizens, creating new knowledge that will be of the benefit to the whole of the UK and worldwide, reducing health inequalities, equipping our decision makers with information through which we can organise services, and bringing innovation and newer knowledge rapidly into practice in the minimum possible timescale. And in order to do that, we need leadership, we need organisation, we need participation, we need resources, and we need a strategy. And I think the report that Neelam and our colleagues have brought to us today really brings to life one of those critical areas of infrastructure that we think we're well placed with the NHS in London in order to give the benefits that I've set out. Neelam, thanks very much.
Vin, thank you very much for a really informative view from your eyes in managing the challenges of the health and care system at the moment. And I think what you say is really important here is, in order to meet these challenges that the community that we live in faces, and not just the community that we live in faces, but nationally and globally, having the tools to do that and the proximity to be near the experts and at the coalface is really important. So thank you for your views there, and also reflecting back on the report. So with that, Ian has already said his remarks, so thank you, Ian, for that. I haven't opened the floor to questions, although I do realise that there is one question there, which Chantal, I know it's from you, and what I'm going to do is we'll take note of that, because I know that there are other questions. I won't open the floor to questions, but if there are any, when you see the report that anybody would like to ask any of the panel, then please direct them to MedCity, and there is a contact number or email on the report itself, and we will respond to those directly. So I'd just like to thank you all the presenters very much to spend their precious time in sharing their views to the audience here today. And I'd like to thank all the participants and the audience that have signed up in doing that. Now, I know that there were a few difficulties, I think, in the beginning of people entering the meeting, but we are recording it, so we will be sending out the recording to everybody should you've missed the beginning bit. The final thing to say is that we have got a networking sort of breakout room for lab providers. So you'll know who you are, because you'll be directed to this breakout room. So for those people that aren't going to be joining that, I want to wish you a very good rest of the evening, and thank you again for joining.